They stripped you of support, not because you deserved abandonment, but because they assumed stripping you would strip your spirit. They thought removing the scaffolding of approval, the illusion of belonging, would leave you hollow and desperate. They thought your worth depended on proximity to their noise. But what they forgot is that dependency is a choice, not a sentence. When they pushed you into isolation, they did not leave you weaker. They left you undistracted, and with distraction gone, you could finally see them, see yourself, with horrifying clarity. They mistook isolation for destruction. It was transformation. They thought isolation would humiliate you, that shame would gnaw at your foundation until you begged for re-entry into their system. But shame is a tool of the guilty, not the aware. And you were never guilty. You were evolving. Alone, you learned the ruthless economy of truth. You learned how much of your identity had been rented out to keep others comfortable. You learned that surviving the withdrawal of their acceptance was not suffering, it was detox. Their absence was not a void. It was the removal of parasites who called themselves friends, family, community. Their approval had always been a leash disguised as belonging. Once severed, you discovered you could breathe without asking permission. They thought they had broken your legs. In truth, they had only taken away the crutches you never needed. Your first steps without them were clumsy, violent, uncertain. But each step was yours. Every unsteady moment hardened your balance. Every absence of applause forced you to become the audience you once begged for. You stopped performing because there was no one left to fool. And the absence of an audience became the birth of your real self. They will never understand what they created when they cast you out. They expected collapse. They expected desperation. They expected a return conditioned by gratitude for their scraps. They didn't prepare for your complete internal rewiring. They didn't imagine a version of you that no longer needed external validation to know your own worth. You became self-fueled. You turned into a being that could outweight, outlast, and outgrow anything designed to break lesser mind. And when you returned, you didn't ask for a seat at their table. You didn't seek acceptance. You stood, silent, and let your mere existence expose their smallness. Human beings are terrified of what they cannot control. When they can no longer regulate your emotions with silence, no longer pull your strings with praise or withdrawal, they panic. Because control, not care, was always the architecture behind their kindness. They did not want your growth. They wanted your containment. They wanted the version of you that was useful to them, not dangerous to them. And when you returned, without chains, without wounds they could admire or manipulate, you became something they could neither pity nor punish. You became untouchable. They will say you grew bitter. They will call you cold. They will paint your boundaries as cruelty. That's how the weak cope with witnessing strength they cannot mimic. You didn't grow bitter, you grew discerning. You didn't grow cold, you grew selective. You didn't grow cruel, you grew unwilling to carry the consequences of their cowardice. The exile taught you the mathematics of energy, how little you need, how much they demand, and how rarely they reciprocate. You became surgical. Surgical with your presence, surgical with your trust, surgical with your time. And to those who once fed off your openness like parasites, this felt like betrayal. You owe no explanations. Growth, real growth, always looks like betrayal to those still married to their stagnation. They thought betrayal would break you. Instead, betrayal forced you into a confrontation with yourself that no comfort zone would have ever offered. You discovered your thresholds, your limits, your breaking points, and you learned that even at your lowest, even in the depths they celebrated as your grave, you carried something they would never touch: self-respect, born from self-rescue. You no longer ask why they betrayed you. You no longer replay the moments of abandonment like broken film. You know why. Weak people betray because they think loyalty is leverage, because they believe attachment makes you hostage to them, because when they see potential they cannot control, they seek to wound it until it either dies or returns submissive. Your survival without submission disrupted their blueprint. Your silence dismantled their delusions. You were not supposed to survive without them. You were not supposed to thrive beyond them. You didn't survive exile by becoming hardened. You survived by becoming honest. Honest about who deserved your vulnerability. Honest about where you had given too much and demanded too little. Honest about the difference between sacrifice and self-sabotage. You don't need revenge. You are the revenge. Every breath you take beyond the limitations they tried to write for you is a declaration. You cannot break what was rebuilt without begging hands. You cannot control what no longer requires permission to exist. You cannot shame a soul that has already faced the abyss and decided to live unafraid. You didn't walk back into their world to prove anything to them. You didn't come back to showcase scars like trophies. You returned because survival without confrontation is not survival. It's hiding. And you have no use for hiding anymore. You carry your transformation openly, not as a warning, but as a fact. You move differently now. Not hurried, not hungry for acceptance, but deliberate, calculating, sovereign. You no longer flinch at being misunderstood. You no longer thirst for recognition from hands that once tried to bury you. You are past persuasion, past performance, past permission. You don't even need to correct their lies about you. Their confusion is a smaller battle than the war you already won internally. They will keep guessing, keep rewriting, keep trying to piece together how you escaped the grave they dug with their smiles and their silence. But understanding your survival would require facing the cruelty they justified. And cowards never study the mirror that exposes them. They will invent softer stories to protect themselves from their own betrayal. They will call your resilience luck or madness or arrogance, anything but what it is. Evidence of a spirit they couldn't kill even when they had every advantage. You survived not because you had help, not because you had sympathy. You survived because you chose to abandon the need for both. When you needed compassion, they offered conditions. When you needed honesty, they offered distortion. When you needed space, they offered ultimatums. And when you needed distance to breathe, they labeled your growth abandonment. You learn that some betrayals are not personal, they're inevitable. They happen because you stopped serving their illusions. And when you stop serving illusions, the people addicted to them will call you selfish, will call you dangerous, will call you dangerous. Good, let them. There is no higher compliment than being called dangerous by those who thrive on others' submission. You owe no one the soft version of your resurrection. Let them choke on the absence of the version of you they exploited. Let them drown in the realization that they crafted your silence with their own neglect. You are not the architect of their emptiness. You are the proof that their construction was always hollow. You no longer bleed publicly. You no longer break audibly. Your wounds have calcified into weapons they cannot recognize until they feel their sting. Every room you enter now is a reckoning, not because you seek revenge, but because you exist beyond their reach. Freedom cost you everything they were unwilling to pay. Comfort, belonging, the illusion of certainty. You paid it gladly. You lost people who thought you were disposable and found yourself invaluable. You lost crowds who loved your compliance and found solitude that sharpened your instincts. You lost homes built on conditions and built a fortress inside your own spirit that cannot be exiled by anyone ever again. Every sacrifice was an upgrade. Every loss was subtraction by cancer. You lost nothing that could withstand truth, and everything you lost made room for a version of yourself that could finally endure the weight of being fully alive. Their future attempts to re-enter your life will carry the stale scent of desperation wrapped in nostalgia. They will miss the version of you that tolerated their mediocrity. They will long for the presence that once validated their performance. But your return was never about reunion. It was about revelation. You have no interest in rebuilding bridges that led to nowhere. You carry no hatred, no vendetta, but you carry memory. And memory is a sword sharper than any apology. You remember who built gates instead of doors. You remember who cheered when you fell. You remember, and you move accordingly. You no longer seek peace with people who declared war against your becoming. You no longer seek understanding from those who chose convenience over loyalty. You no longer seek recognition from those who only valued you as long as you were useful. Your survival is not a performance. It's not a testimony to them. It's a covenant with yourself. A vow. Never again will you forget your own worth in the name of temporary belonging. Never again will you soften your edges to fit inside places too small for your magnitude. You didn't just survive what they did to you, you rendered their betrayal irrelevant. You exist now as living evidence that betrayal cannot touch a mind that no longer needs external scaffolding to stand tall. They gambled everything on the hope that you were dependent, that your strength was a borrowed thing, given to you by proximity, by applause, by their temporary validation. They miscalculated. Your strength was never on loan, it was dormant, waiting for conditions brutal enough to ignite it fully. Now your silence haunts them more than your words ever could. Every time your name crosses their mind, it brings an aftershock of regret they cannot show the world. There is a kind of terror that creeps into people when they realize they were not the architects of your story. They were merely footnotes in it. They thought they were writing your ending with their betrayal, with their silence, with their exile. They thought removing their presence would remove your potential, but your silence in response was louder than any retaliation could have been. You did not chase, you did not plead. You simply vanished into the abyss they thought would consume you, and emerged as something they could no longer define. And that, more than anything, dismantled their illusions. They wanted to be your downfall so they could feel powerful. Instead, they became irrelevant, and irrelevance burns deeper than any revenge ever could. You became proof that survival was never about clinging, it was about outgrowing. They will never say it aloud. Their pride is too fragile, their self-inheritance too brittle, but deep in their private moments, the moments no one sees, they feel it. They know. They see flashes of you in everything they try to build now, and it weakens their foundation. Every new alliance they form, every new circle they try to infiltrate, carries a shadow they cannot name but cannot escape. The memory of the one who thrived after they threw you away, you became a living contradiction to their favorite lie, that those who are abandoned deserve it, that exile is a death sentence. You rewrote the narrative without lifting a sword. You weaponized endurance. You weaponized transformation. And no matter how much they deny it, no matter how much they laugh louder and pretend harder, you altered them. Not with hate, not with violence. With survival they could not sabotage. And now you move through the world differently, not with vengeance painted across your face, not with rage boiling in your blood, but with a steadiness that is impossible to fake. You have seen betrayal dressed as friendship, cowardice dressed as concern, weakness dressed as leadership, and you are no longer fooled. You do not need to announce your evolution to those who tried to engineer your downfall. Your existence alone is indictment enough. Every room you walk into, you carry a gravity now, a quiet warning that radiates without a word. I survived. Without you. I do not fear you. I will never need you again. And that silent, undeniable truth will echo longer than any speech, any confrontation, any scream. You are the mirror they cannot escape, the proof that survival is the ultimate, irrevocable form of power.